over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I really appreciate it. And I want to thank Villanova University for allowing me to come on today and do this webinar. And I really want to thank everybody who's joined us for the webinar today. Hopefully we're going to learn something and have a little fun doing it. So as Rebecca said, my name's Nick Fry. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I'm the behavioral counseling manager at MetaFast, which is a health and wellness company located in Baltimore, Maryland. So today we're going to talk a little bit about motivational interviewing, specifically how we can overcome client resistance to change. So let me make sure I got the control of the slides here. There we go. And here are some of the learning objectives that we're hopefully going to come out with today. And we're going to recognize the occurrence and causes of resistance. We're going to identify effective strategies for reducing resistance, identify and overcome the traps that hinder effectiveness or get in our way, and then we're going to identify some key challenges to using motivational interviewing in healthcare settings. I know we've got a lot of registered dietitians and nurses and other healthcare practitioners on the call today, so we're really going to talk a little bit about how motivational interviewing can be utilized in a healthcare setting and some of the roadblocks that we might find. So let's first start off talking a little bit about what resistance looks like. You've probably experienced this when working with clients. Sometimes it looks like out and out arguing or challenging by the client, or perhaps blaming other people or plans or programs. It can be excuses or rationalization, minimizing the problem, basically being completely inattentive or not even answering in the session. You know, resistance can really take a lot of different forms. And as I said, you've probably experienced this in your practice. But what really does resistance feel like? Well, resistance feels like a wrestling match. It feels like you're on one side and the client's on the other side, and you're trying to convince them to make this change in their life, to get healthy, to eat better, to exercise. And it feels like they're resisting you. They have reasons or rationalizations or excuses, and it feels like it's this back and forth battle when you're just trying to help them make some changes in their life. But what does motivational interviewing feel like? If we know that resistance feels like wrestling, well, if you're doing motivational interviewing well, it feels like dancing. Just like these cute little babies here, it feels like you're grooving and shaking and having a good time. And you're both working together to really accomplish the same goals. So what exactly is resistance? Well, resistance is not an inherent problem with the client. It's not stubbornness or a lack of desire for change on their part, and it's not a lack of pain. A lot of people talk about this idea of rock bottom. Well, they just haven't hit rock bottom, or they haven't experienced enough pain in their life in order to make these changes. But resistance is not really any of these things. It's not necessarily a problem with the client. What resistance actually is a misalliance in the practitioner and client relationship. In other words, we as the practitioner and the client aren't on the same page. Well, what causes resistance, though? It can be client-generated. Resistance can come from the client themselves. Perhaps they have some type of internal conflict with making changes. You know, they want to, but they don't want to. They want the results, but they don't want to put in the work, something like that. They might have some kind of conflict with others, some kind of external conflict. Maybe their doctor told them, you've got to lose weight, you've got to go do this, or a spouse or a friend, and they feel this external pressure to make these changes, but they might not feel it internally themselves. Also, client resistance can be classified as learned helplessness. In other words, they've tried and failed so many times in the past that why would this time be any different? And so they come in with this learned helplessness attitude. And all these things is how a client might generate resistance. But it's not just from the client. Remember, it's a misalliance in the client-practitioner relationship. So we as practitioners can also generate resistance. And when we have a relationship with the client that lacks agreement, collaboration, empathy, or client autonomy, that can really generate resistance in the relationship. But we also don't always do, it's not like we're doing this consciously or on purpose. A lot of times we unwittingly elicit that resistance. And I'm going to give you an example of what we might do as practitioners that would be in a good-hearted or good-natured desire to help our client, but elicits the resistance. You might say, well, if you continue being so inactive, you're going to continue to struggle with your weight. I know you would feel much better if you did more and were fitter. That's a good-hearted desire to help this person to start exercising, to be more active. However, this places this external pressure on them, and resistance could be elicited from that communication. So again, how do we end up causing resistance? What we don't want to do is we don't want to be like bad luck Brian here, where he really wants to help a client, but unwittingly makes matters worse. And there's actually 3 ways that we do that. The first is we take control away from the client. We take the control away from them being able to make their own choices and decisions and leading their life. We might misjudge the perceived level of importance the change is in the client's life, the confidence that the client has, or their readiness to make those changes. Or we might do the classic misstep when we meet force with force. So if they're giving me resistance and all this force, I'm going to give that right back to them. So when we're experiencing resistance, we want to ask ourselves a few questions to see if it's practitioner generated. Are we taking control away? So ask yourself, have I somehow undermined the client's sense of personal freedom? And can I hand this control back to them? So if we're experiencing resistance, ask yourself these questions. Also, you might want to ask yourself, have I misjudged the client's feelings of readiness, importance, or confidence in some way? Have I jumped too far ahead of the client on these dimensions? And am I, ahead of them? Are we on different chapters in this book, not even on the same page, but am I too far ahead? Do I believe that they have more confidence than they actually have? Am I focusing on the wrong dimension? Sometimes we're trying to build up a person's confidence when really they don't think the change is that important. Maybe they don't think exercise is an important part of their life, but we're trying to build up their confidence to exercise. But they don't even think it's important, so we're focusing on the wrong dimension for them. Also, how do they really feel about change? What really is their feelings about it? What are their thoughts about making a change in their life? Because change can be really scary, really difficult. So we want to make sure that we're always checking in with them. How do you feel about this change? What are your thoughts on changing your diet, changing how you move in your life, changing these behaviors? We always want to be collaborating with them on these things. Also, if we're experiencing resistance, we might want to ask ourselves, am I meeting force with force? Are they putting up resistance, and then does that make me kind of come back at them even harder? Am I being too confrontational with them? Am I going after these things? You're the one that ate that, or you're the one that made that choice. Am I being too confrontational? Because that can elicit resistance as well. And can I do anything to go along with the client? Not necessarily agree with everything that they say, but go along with them, kind of reduce that confrontation and change course altogether. So how do we deal with resistance? We've already kind of identified what resistance is, and then some questions we can ask ourselves to see if we're the ones generating that resistance. But how do we deal with resistance if it comes up in the relationship? Well, client resistance is decreased through the use of non-confrontational methods. And there's 3 ways to do this. We can emphasize personal choice and control. We can reassess their readiness, importance, or confidence. How ready are you to make this change?